You think you are just behind, that you need to work harder, learn one more skill, and finally the ladder will open. Then you look at the world in 2026 and you notice something ugly. The ladder is not missing. The ladder is being moved while you are climbing it. And here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. The people who look lucky are not lucky. They are prepared. They exploit timing, perception, and leverage. They do it with calm certainty while everyone else is still arguing about motivation videos and grind. This is not a speech about optimism. This is financial education about how power actually moves in markets, jobs, housing, and money. This is not financial advice. It is analysis so you can stop feeding the same lies that keep you controllable. Let's start with a story style you already understand. Not the textbook kind, the kind that feels like cheating. In a lot of old war thinking, there is a phrase that gets butchered and sold as a slogan. It sounds inspirational. It sounds harmless. But when you strip it down, it is a cold instruction for survival. Before you strike, you must already be in a position where you cannot lose. The original idea shows up in war classics, but it is really about commerce, leverage, and avoiding traps. In 2026, your enemy is not one villain. Your enemy is a system that punishes uncertainty. It punishes late decisions. It punishes people who rely on faith. And it rewards anyone who can convert weak position into stronger position before the real contest even begins. Now you are probably thinking, fine, but how does this help me when AI is replacing jobs faster than anyone admitted, when inflation already drained your purchasing power, and when housing prices turned into a permanent subscription plan you cannot cancel? You might have noticed that the same media that told you rates will come down also quietly stopped telling you what real wages are buying today. So here's what we are going to do. First, we will expose why most people fail financially even when they work. Second, we will break down what prepared in advance looks like in modern money systems, from the Fed to rent. Third, we will talk about perception as leverage, because the market does not reward reality, it rewards narrative that can move decisions. Fourth, we will take the idea of using weaker position without bleeding and apply it to employment, investing, and entrepreneurship in an AI year. Finally, you will leave with a call to action that does not require fantasy, just strategy. But we cannot build this from fluffy ideas. We need names, dates, mechanisms, and the part of the truth that stings. People love to say that success comes from talent and intelligence. They say it like a lullaby because it makes failure feel personal. If you were unsuccessful, then at least there is a simple explanation. You lacked ability. So you keep searching for the missing trait. You keep paying for courses. You keep telling yourself you just have to find your niche. But history does not support the comforting story. Look at how empires actually changed. The winners were not always the most talented. Sometimes the winners were the ones willing to play the dirtiest game at the right moment. Sometimes they were the ones who understood that the battlefield is rarely the place where you lose or win. The battlefield is just where the decision becomes visible. In older war narratives, there is a pattern. The smartest strategists rarely rush. They wait for the moment when the opponent's options collapse. They do not rely on brute force. They do not act like confidence is a substitute for planning. Now swap the battlefield for the financial system in 2026. Your enemy could be unemployment. It could be a mortgage that is now a monthly payment you never agreed to in a dream. It could be credit card interest that compounds like a slow injury. It could be a pension that is technically promised on paper, but practically unavailable when the plan runs out. It could be Social Security delayed to an older age because life expectancy rose and the system did not adjust fast enough. The mechanism is the same. If you act before you are positioned, you lose. If you strike without leverage, you bleed. If you rely on luck, you become the liquidity source for someone else's return. And here is the first pattern interrupt. In the past, the poor have no chance story was sold as destiny. In 2026, it is sold as math. People say the top 1% owns more than ever. Wealth inequality is worsening, but at least everyone has equal opportunity. You can check the data and feel your stomach sink. Since the late 1990s, and especially after the financial crisis, wealth has concentrated in a way that is not just personal misfortune, it is structural. According to Federal Reserve data, households in the top income and wealth categories have captured a large share of asset price growth. That means stocks, housing equity, and business ownership became compounding engines for the already wealthy, while wage earners faced stagnant or slower rising incomes. So you do what you are told. You invest, you try to build a retirement plan, then you watch the stock market hit highs while real people are drowning, and you ask, how can both be true? Because the market is not a fairness machine, it is a price mechanism. Prices rise when the marginal buyer has power. In many cases, that marginal buyer is not you. While you were told to save, the wealthy were borrowing against assets at low rates, then using that borrowed cash to buy more assets. They can do this because they already hold collateral. They can do it because they have credit lines. They can do it because they are not forced to sell at the worst time. They are positioned. Now connect that to the Fed. When the Federal Reserve raised interest rates aggressively from 2022 through 2023, the effect was not just inflation goes down. It also meant mortgages got expensive, debt got more expensive, and refinancing opportunities disappeared for many households. Even when inflation cooled later, real purchasing power did not magically revert. Your salary might still look stable on paper, but the basket of goods you buy changed. Insurance costs rose, food costs rose, housing costs rose, and the people who own assets did not experience the same damage because asset valuations were already supported by their ability to withstand volatility. This brings us to the dark truth in plain language. Most people do not lose because they are weak. They lose because they are unprepared. They strike too early. They enter the market before the market can trap them. They confuse effort with advantage. Think about employment in an AI era. In 2020 and 2021, there was a flood of advice. Learn to code. It was repeated like a mantra. But in 2026, AI systems can write code, refactor code, generate test cases, and assist with debugging at a pace that outclasses most entry-level workers. So what happens when you learn to code and still cannot compete? You become the victim of time. Your skill takes time to develop. AI skill acquisition takes seconds. Meanwhile, companies do not hire more people to do the work if software can do it. They reduce headcount, they restructure, they keep profits, they replace you with machines and call it efficiency. Now imagine a person trying to change jobs in this environment. They might have the talent, but not the timing. They apply to positions that are being cut. They invest in the wrong training. They bet their future on narratives that were true in 2019, not true in 2026. The old phrase we started with, translated badly by most people, is supposed to teach the opposite. It is not be so confident that you will win. It is be so positioned that losing is unlikely. And here is where the story gets truly ugly. Most advice you hear is designed to keep you moving so you never build leverage. It keeps you busy with activities that do not change your position. Fitness content, productivity content, side hustle content, motivational content. All of it can become a treadmill when it replaces strategy. So let's talk about what being positioned actually looks like. In war terms, positioned means you have already studied the ground. You already know how failure would look. You already have alternatives. You are not guessing, you are rehearsing. Now here is the second pattern interrupt. You have likely done the opposite in money. You likely asked what is the best investment instead of what happens if it fails. You likely asked how can I grow my business instead of how do I survive if sales come in late. You likely asked can I afford this house instead of can I afford the worst case scenario where rates stay high for years and my income is disrupted. In 2026, that question is not academic. Climate-driven economic disruptions are forcing migration and changing insurance markets. In some regions, home insurance has become either unaffordable or unavailable. That means your housing cost is not just rent or mortgage. It is also the risk premium you pay to exist in a certain location. Imagine you bought because the payment looked manageable in 2021. Then in 2024 and 2025, insurance prices jumped. A storm hits, the insurer withdraws. Now you are dealing with a second bill you did not plan for. If you lose your job due to AI restructuring, the house becomes a financial trap. That is what unprepared looks like. It is not that you lack discipline, it is that you built your life around a single scenario. In war thinking, you never assume the enemy behaves like your fantasy. You rehearse failures, you plan contingencies, and you treat timing like an asset. This is why the advantage before the fight matters. If you are positioned, you can afford to wait. If you are not positioned, you must gamble. Now let's shift from war to modern business, because business is war with spreadsheets and contracts, and that is not metaphor. It is how bargaining works. There is a business model that sounds boring until you understand why it prints money with less risk. The model is simple. Get paid before you deliver. That means you reduce your cash flow risk. You reduce your need to borrow. You reduce your exposure to demand collapsing after you spend money. This model shows up everywhere when you look closely. Subscription services, pre-orders, ticket sales, deposits, down payments. Even crowdfunding is a form of pre-positioning because you prove demand before scaling. Now picture an example that will feel uncomfortably familiar if you have ever tried to start something. Suppose you open a photography studio. You think the risk is your equipment. You think the risk is your skill. You think the risk is your marketing. But the real risk is different. The risk is rent, payroll, and inventory expenses before your cash arrives. Traditional studios often have high fixed costs and limited geographic reach. They may be in busy areas, but they are competing for customers who are also competing for their time and money. You can be good and still lose because you run out of cash while waiting for customers. Now imagine a studio that flips the risk. They do not rely on walk-in customers in a local area. They build content reach. They post work online. They attract an audience that does not care about local proximity.
Then they require a deposit paid up front before the session. That changes the entire cash equation. If you can pull deposits before the service is delivered, you do not need to hope sales happen. You have already measured demand.
You have already converted attention into money. And because the deposit arrives early, you are less likely to panic. Less panic means fewer desperate decisions. Less desperate decisions means better outcomes. That is the advantage before the fight. Now extend this to other services. You can train, teach, or consult with deposits. You can sell a cohort course with upfront tuition. You can do event-based services where customers pay now and you deliver later. You can even do digital products where production time is your bottleneck, not customer acquisition. The point is not that every model is perfect. The point is that being positioned reduces the chance of financial death. But here is the cliffhanger into the next layer. Cash flow is only one form of positioning. There is a darker one, and it is called perception. Because money runs on decisions, and decisions run on beliefs. This is where the old war thinking gets extra ruthless. If you cannot be strong yet, you can be seen as strong. If you cannot show results yet, you can show status signals. If you do not have the resources, you can create the impression that you do. In older texts, this is tied to deception and misdirection. In modern terms, deception is not always criminal. It can be marketing, it can be brand design, it can be the difference between being taken seriously and being ignored. It can be the difference between a banker doubting you and a lender believing you. But there is a line. If you cross the line into outright fraud, you get punished. That is not what we are talking about. We are talking about a brutal truth. Humans respond to signals. If you want an example, look at how credit works. When you want a loan, lenders are not only evaluating your ability to pay, they are evaluating the story you represent. They evaluate your financial identity. They evaluate your business structure. They evaluate whether you look like someone who can manage risk. If you are broke and you show up as someone who looks broke, some doors stay closed. If you show up as someone who looks like a safe bet, doors open. Now you might say, that is unfair. You are right. It is unfair in the same way that a battlefield is unfair. But understanding it is power. This is why the wealthy are not just richer, they are better at signaling. Their lifestyle is not only consumption, it is also a form of credibility. In 2026, this extends into the creator economy, which is the third layer of illusion. You see short videos of people claiming passive income. You see edited clips of one funnel away from freedom. You hear talk about automating income with AI. You think it is easy. But the reality is harsh. Most creators make $0 or so little that it does not change their life. A handful make serious money. Those are the ones who already have reach, already have capital, already have networks, already have distribution. So if you are a normal person, your time is not positioned, your attention is not a stable asset, your audience is not guaranteed. You can build content, but you cannot assume that content equals cash. In war terms, you are not yet in the place where your plan cannot fail. So you must protect yourself. You must treat your creative efforts like a reconnaissance mission, not like an invasion. And here is where the darkness turns into something you can use. You need to stop thinking of competition as the Olympics. In the Olympics, there is a winner and a loser. In business and jobs, competition is messier. Two companies might race each other down on price until both collapse. A third party benefits. That happens in industries where everyone forgets that survival matters more than headlines. The old idea of winning absolutely is really about avoiding damage. It is about winning without becoming weaker. It is about shaping the environment so the opponent cannot easily fight back. In practice, that means you do not always need to outspend everyone. You need to choose your battlefield. In 2026, that means picking markets where your capabilities are scarce, your exposure is manageable, and your downside is protected. It also means you avoid trying to compete with stronger players on their terms. This connects to AI disruption. If AI can do the task better than most humans, and you compete on raw execution, you lose. But if you compete on something AI cannot easily replicate, such as relationships, trust, domain-specific judgment, and the ability to structure incentives across people, you might survive. And that leads to a necessary question you probably do not want to ask at midnight. Are you competing on the part that AI can replicate? If your job is primarily repetitive analysis, templated reports, content generation, or basic customer support scripting, the threat is real. Even if you are good, companies can automate the workflow. They might still hire humans for higher level oversight, but the number of human seats shrinks. That is not conspiracy. It is observed behavior across industries. When labor becomes cheaper to replace, the market adjusts. So what do? This is where people usually give you useless advice like learn faster or work on your soft skills. Soft skills are not magic shields. Soft skills can help you get interviews, but they do not always protect your labor value if the core work is automated. The strategy is more specific. You need to build leverage. You need to build optionality. You need to build a system that can produce results even when your job is threatened, even when the economy tightens, even when the Fed keeps rates restrictive longer than expected. Now the third pattern interrupt. Remember the inflation story you were told. You were told inflation came down and that was the end of the pain, but the real injury is purchasing power. If your salary did not rise as fast as the cost of living, you are worse off, even if the headline inflation rate looks better. Now imagine the retirement crisis layered on top. Many people in the United States are delaying retirement. Some do not have a choice because their savings did not grow enough. Pensions are underfunded in various ways, and aging populations create political pressure. Social Security is not going to vanish overnight, but its solvency issues mean the promised future might require later claiming and more conservative benefits. Meanwhile, global debt has crossed into territory that makes every interest rate decision more dangerous. When governments carry too much debt, when consumers carry too much credit card and auto debt, when corporations refinance, interest rate levels become a public safety issue. They are not just a lever, they are a pressure system. So if you are just one emergency away from bankruptcy, you cannot treat learning and investing like hobbies. You need positioning. This takes us to the two principles idea embedded in those old teachings. The first principle is deceptive positioning with strategy rather than strength. The second is borrowing power from the trend, from timing, from where the world is already moving. Let's apply the second principle to 2026 directly, borrowing from the trend. The trend in the last decade was connectivity. The trend now is compute and distribution. AI is compute, platforms are distribution. People can create content, build audiences, and sell products without asking permission from traditional gatekeepers. But there is a catch. Distribution does not pay you automatically. You must align with what platforms monetize. You must understand what drives attention. And attention is not the same as demand. You can go viral and still not get paid if you cannot convert attention into transactions or long-term value. In 2026, the most realistic trend leverage is not pretending everyone will become a full-time creator. The realistic leverage is using tools and platforms to get demand signals early, test products cheaply, and build credibility over time. This is why deposits matter. This is why pre-sales matter. This is why community matters more than vanity metrics. And this is why you need a mentor or a system, because speed matters. Here is a micro story. Picture a 32-year-old nurse named David. He works nights. He takes overtime when he can. In 2020, he watched videos about passive income. He started making posts, but he never built a plan to monetize. In 2023, he tried to learn to trade because he was tired of paycheck to paycheck. He made a few risky moves, got emotional, and stopped. In 2024, his apartment rent increased. In 2025, his mother's medical bills rose. David is not stupid. David is not lazy. David is trapped in a cycle where life events keep eating his available cash and his available attention. His problem is not character. His problem is positioning. He has no buffer. He has no leverage. He has no pre-monetized path. Now imagine a different David, same job, same burnout risk. But he starts with deposits. He teaches one skill he already has because healthcare training exists and trust exists. He sells a paid cohort to other nurses and offers certification resources. He collects payments up front. He uses that cash to buy time back, so he is not trapped in extra shifts forever. He does not quit his job. He builds optionality. That is not magic. That is strategy. Now you might ask, isn't that just entrepreneurship? Yes. But the dark truth is that many entrepreneurs are actually just doing high-risk gambling disguised as passion. They do product development first, then marketing later, then funding never, then layoffs, then bankruptcy. They strike before they can afford failure. They fight before they are positioned. This is why older war thinking matters even now. It teaches you to protect downside. It teaches you to wait for better terms. It teaches you to build from weak position into stronger position. And here is where we connect to the hustle illusion of social media. You see people making content about fast wins, but if you watch carefully, the winners are not the ones with the most hustle. The winners are the ones who have already built infrastructure. Infrastructure is boring. Infrastructure is not flashy. Infrastructure is systems. It is a list. It is a customer pipeline. It is a contract template. It is a cash reserve. It is credit strength. It is a brand that reduces friction. The average viewer thinks success is a moment. It is not. Success is a structure that prevents your failure from becoming your death. Now we go deeper into the absolutely wins concept, because it is misunderstood in a way that keeps people destructive.